As I said earlier, Florida has been on the forefront with regard to legislation across the United States. And from my experience, I first started attending work groups, or we had the Attorney General started several years ago. I want to say in like 2010, Twyla might remember. And what started happening is we were getting criminal prosecutors, adult protective services, elder law attorneys together, and we were having these 3-day conferences related to elder abuse and exploitation. And what we were realizing is that there was a real problem with the law. In particular, there was one prosecutor, Lisa Chitaro, from Naples, who was super gung-ho on prosecuting exploitation cases. And at the time, Representative Passidomo, who was in the House of Representatives in the Florida legislature, started to hear about these problems with prosecutions. And in conjunction with a lot of those bright minds that were getting together through these Attorney General conferences, she started to hear that serious changes needed to be made. Her first draft of changes to the exploitation bill was vetted. It hadn't passed, but it was actually vetted at one of these 3-day conferences. And what we learned, and Laura, I don't remember if you were there or not, but Laura Moody has been instrumental in helping to decipher good law versus bad law. And for example, I remember one of the first drafts was, there was some provision in there that would have actually required expert testimony on capacity issues. And as many of you know, like in today's world, anybody can testify to capacity issues. We don't need experts. We kind of know it when we see it. So in any event, we had a lot of trouble figuring out and maneuvering through what was going to be a good law and a bad law. And what Representative Passidomo did then, and what she continues to do today, is she put together a work group. She actually also put together a work group this year to talk about some of the problems with the guardianship laws and professional guardians that have gone rogue. And so this is her skill and her forte as it relates to senior issues, in particular as it relates to exploitation. The work group that she put together in 2012 took a couple of years, but what they came up with was absolutely the best and the strongest exploitation laws in the country. That work group, Laura Moody sat on. We were like locked in that room with Robert Anderson. Twyla gave some help. Richard Sherman, who's not with us today, but was instrumental in trying to help us figure out the best laws that would help prosecutors actually be able to prosecute these cases. And from the civil side, many of you know or don't know that we use the criminal definition of exploitation in order to pressure on the civil side with treble damages, meaning that if in fact someone has committed criminal exploitation, we can send them a letter, and if they don't pay the amount that they stole within 30 days, we can, on the civil side, can recover triple the amount that they've exploited, which is huge, and it's been very helpful to us. Couple that with the exploitation injunction, which now Senator Passidomo was the co-sponsor of, and she has a track record of bringing not just Florida, but the entire United States up on good legislation that's helpful at the state level. So with that, I would like to introduce, and she is now for 2023, 2024, going to be the president of the Senate of the Florida legislature. So come on up here and tell us about yourself. Senator Passidomo.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's really a privilege of mine to support and defend and protect the vulnerable citizens of our state. You know, there's a lot of legislation that I've worked on in the last 9 years, but I thought I'd kind of give you a little flavor of why this is so important to me, other than the fact that I have a 97-year-old dad and a 96-year-old mom who would probably take me out of their will if I didn't. But when I first got involved in this, a newspaper article came to my attention, and it was in Marco Island. A family, a husband and wife had moved from the Midwest to Marco. They were hale, hearty, young, in their 70s, retired. Kids, of course, stayed up in Michigan or Minnesota or wherever they were. And the couple had a wonderful life for 8 to 10 years. And as age advanced, the husband developed dementia, or the wife developed dementia, then the husband developed dementia. And they were befriended by the realtor who sold them their house 8 years earlier. And the realtor maybe had good intentions to begin with, but what was happening was she started out with taking them to the grocery store, bringing them to dinner, that kind of thing. And before we know it, the silver was gone, the jewelry was gone, credit cards were in the realtor's name. And the final straw that broke the camel's back was the realtor put them in the back bedroom, locked the door, and just moved her family into the house. And the daughter, you know, families, the daughter's up north, had the kids, and mom and dad, I'm being taken care of came to visit, and they wouldn't let her see her parents. And she barged her way in, and it is so tragic. Her father said to her about the realtor, "She's my girlfriend, I'm going to marry her." Because he had dementia and with his wife, who was in a wheelchair sitting by his side. That had to stop. That has to stop. That continues to occur. And we, all of us in this room are on the front line of helping to stop those kind of practices. So from there, we did pass some legislation. The first thing, there were kind of two tracks that I'm interested in. One was the guardianship issues, and we tightened up guardianship laws. You probably know what they are in terms of how you become a guardian, what are the things you need to do, the reports you have to give. We've changed certain laws to require to allow audits of reports. We are trying to hold guardians' feet to the fire. The good guardians do a great job, but some of the bad guardians don't, and so we need to continue to tighten up our laws. With regard to guardianship, we're working on a bill this year as a reaction to what happened in Orlando, when a guardian that had way too many cases was routinely signing do not resuscitate orders for her wards, to the point where one of them said, "I don't want that," and she signed it anyway, and he passed away. We can't have that, so we are going to change that. Conflict of interest, where guardians get themselves appointed, accept gifts for becoming guardians. All of those things are going to go away, not to in any way harm the good guardians, but to stop bad guardians. That's one track. The other track is the problem of elder exploitation, because frankly, the guardianship program is under court supervision, so at least we can catch those. But what we don't catch are the random scenarios like what happened in Marco Island, and it happens all over the state, to the tune of billions of dollars, where our older folks move to Florida when they are younger, they are retired, they're happy, they play golf, they bridge and whatever, and as they get older, they are not as capable of caring for themselves, and they trust people. And the saddest part about that Marco Island family is they didn't want to prosecute the woman because they were embarrassed. They were embarrassed the fact that they got taken advantage of. And I hear this from older people all the time. I don't want to tell my kids what happened because they're going to stick me in a nursing home. They're going to take away my independence. Or, you have older folks who ran businesses and they were captains of industry and they got scammed or taken advantage of, and they don't want to admit it. we didn't want, nobody wants to admit that they got taken advantage of because it makes them look weak and helpless. So we have to find ways to protect these vulnerable citizens from the thieves, the scammers, and the con artists, and unfortunately, oftentimes from their families. And the big issue that I see coming up, and it's a very dicey political issue, is my understanding is most of the elder exploitation or financial abuse is done by their family members, by a family member. And the question I have, and I ask you all to consider as you, practice and work, does the state, do I as a legislator or does law enforcement or does government what is the role of government in family matters? Because here's the issue. You have a parent that gives a power of attorney to their child or allows their child to become their guardian, and the first thing the adult does is go out and buy a Corvette, or what they do is they sell the parent's house because they want to protect their inheritance. Do we have an obligation as a state to interfere in that family relationship? I don't have that answer. I want to have a conversation, a dialogue. I think you have to have a dialogue there because we do have an obligation to protect our vulnerable population. And we do, and we are passing laws, and we are holding non-family members at this point accountable for elder exploitation. And the bill that, I think it was HB 409, because I keep thinking of that song. If a person gets a gift of $10,000 or more from an individual they've known less than 2 years, it's considered exploitation. That's the first time that's ever been in law in the country. It was not challenged, and it is now being employed by prosecutors. And those are the kind of things. But I could not get my colleagues to allow this kind of language to apply to family members. And I think you need to have that conversation, whether we can or should address that. The other thing that I wanted to mention too is the issue of elder exploitation that runs the gamut. And I heard when I came in, talking about being scammed or identity theft. I'd ask you a question. How many people in this room have had their identity stolen? Well, those of you whose hands are not up you just don't know it. And that's a fact. And here it's a huge problem. As I look around the room, most of you, or all, I should say not most of you, all of you have your marbles. You can figure it out. You can, if your credit card's stolen or your social security number stolen, you can do what your speaker earlier did. You can report it. You can do things. But what do you do when you have a 95-year-old who gets a call from the alleged grandson that's in jail saying, "Grandma, I need to get out of jail, and don't tell Dad. You're the only one who's ever loved me." And then we're off to the races. These type of scams happen all the time. And another issue that I ask you to get involved in because you care is open records. I am a huge proponent of the First Amendment. However, private information of private individuals is available everywhere because we, under our open records law, put it there. And so a big problem, and here's an example, when you register to vote, you give them all that information. A thief or a scammer can figure out your social security number from your voter information that you give to our elections people. It wasn't intended for that to happen, but that's what's happening. So you have older folks that are constantly being taken advantage of by identity thieves, fraudsters, and the like. So how do we find a way to protect private information of private citizens? I mean, I know everything I do and every penny I make, what little it is from the legislature or whatever, is a public record. But everybody here your private information and your clients and the older folks you work with should not be public. And I'm trying to have a conversation with the newspapers about it, and they're starting to listen, but they didn't want to at first. So that's another issue that we need to address. My goal as I move in my legislative career, my number one priority has always been protecting our older citizens. So we will continue to pass meaningful legislation dealing with guardians and the like. Now, I do know that the bill that we're filing this year is just as a response to the problem in Orlando with the do not resuscitate orders. And we did have a work group. It got to be kind of big, so Representative Burton and I said, okay, we're just going to file something and see what happens. But I do know that the real property probate and trust law section of the Florida Bar is working on a comprehensive rewrite of the Guardianship Act. And I've seen it. There's some issues that they need to iron out working with the clerks, but that will be a big bill in the next couple of years. And I probably won't file it because I can't file too many bills anymore. I'm only doing one, this guardianship bill that I talked about. So I'm happy to do that. So with that, I mean, I know I want to hear if anybody here has a question or a comment or a thought that they'd like to share with me. I want a dialogue. I want to hear from you because I take this back to Tallahassee and my working groups and whatever, what we can do better and what we're doing wrong. So if anybody would like to just shout out, I would be thrilled to hear from you guys because you're in the trenches. Unless everything we're doing is right. Yes.
Yes, Senator, my name is George Milovich, and I have a question not just about scamming and fraud, but I'll call it something that's legal but not kosher, involving usury like payday loans. And I know that you're kind of concentrating on something else, but you know, I personally have known people who have been in financial straits. They've gotten a payday loan. In fact, after they've died, they're still trying to collect on it. And to me, that just seems so unfair. And it seems like I read some articles, and I'm sorry I can't quote the source, that there could be another way to lend people at a more reasonable interest rate instead of exploiting them. And I even asked David, and he said that the Pentagon said for military people shouldn't get payday loans. So if they're concerned about it, why do we still have payday loans in so many states?
So the question for those of you who didn't hear was concern about payday loans for people and the high interest rates and inability to pay back. What you might be interested to know that Florida has the most robust laws in the country on regulating those the loans, those payday loans, and in terms of interest rate, payment terms, and the like. We do highly regulate. I've spent a lot of time talking with the representatives of AMSCOT, only because they're everywhere, and they are very careful, and if I hear anything differently, I would go into craze mode. They are very careful on compliance with the law, and the federal government was going to require Florida to comply with their law, which is not as robust as ours. Excuse me, I'm having a Marco Rubio moment. But if you hear of any instances of abuse, you let us know. Let your state attorney's office know, because some of these could be fly-by-night operations that are just flying in the face of the law, because our law is pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Reference the 2014 exploitation law for the power of attorneys that were done prior to 2014. Is it retroactive to those documents, or is it only for powers of attorney after the law?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, Shannon could probably answer that better than I.
There's no grandfathering in of all
Right.
powers of attorney. So it applies whether or not you signed it today or signed it in 2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I did yesterday. Yes, in the back.
Marital settlement agreements in a divorce are public record. In that sense, younger people and anyone who's getting a divorce up to be a victim of identity theft. In that marital settlement agreement, it lays out people's assets, their debts, everything. Sometimes poorly written agreements will even include the account numbers. Why can't the legislature fix this so that those marital settlement agreements are kept, and the financial affidavits are kept private?
You're singing my tune. The issue is marital settlement agreements, financial statements, wills, wills, and the trusts are also. They may not show up in the clerk's office's website, but any private individual or anybody could go down to the courthouse and get any court file and be able to look at it, and they do. That is Florida's open government, open records, sunshine laws. And I will tell you that anytime there is a bill that would make some records private, first of all, it needs a 2/3 vote to pass, and secondly, the First Amendment Foundation goes ballistic. And they have a good point for some purposes. For example, we passed in the Parkland bill an exemption from public records of the photos and the 9/11 and the information surrounding the 9/11, the Parkland massacre. Obviously, we want to do that because there are people that really kind of take a prurient interest in that kind of stuff. But what the newspaper people said, well, we really should have access to that because that's the only way that we could report whether or not law enforcement is doing their job by looking at the crime scenes and the like. So it's a really tough issue. It's tough for us to kind of figure that out. So there has to be a valid journalistic purpose, but once you make it open, it's open to everybody. I would like to make certain things private. That is one of those issues that is so hypercharged, and I would like to address it, but I think there are people who think everything we do should be public. Frankly, I think the First Amendment, I have this visual about First Amendment was passed because some guy wanted to stand on a box in the town square and shout out his beliefs because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have phones or whatever. And that's kind of where it came from. You see up in the Boston Commons where they're standing there, that's what it was passed for. But now it really has gone to the point where everything is public. And I'm not sure that's in our best interest. That's another one of those dialogues I'd like to have. So I don't have an answer for you. They redact it on the public records, but it's still there. Here's something that if any of you own a business, your tax ID number of your business is on the Secretary of State's website. So at one point, if you owned a business, you could go online and you could change the name of your officers, change your address and whatever. So could a thief. And what they do now is they confirm your wish to make those changes by sending you an email. But if they don't have your email, somebody could go in on your business page in the Secretary of State's office and change all the information. That was done by thieves many times, where they would do that, and then they go out and use all that information, go get a loan, because they got new officers, new directors of your company. And they workers' comp. Many of you may have gotten a workers' comp claim from some employee you never had because they got all your information. So that's a big I can go on and on about it, but it's something we need to think about in the future with the internet. Yes.
If the senior has an income only as an income from the Social Security disability, the scam should be considered a federal crime, since the robbery is to the federal budget through this Social Security disability. Am I right or am I wrong? Second thing, I think you can do better if you contact Housing Authority, who is the owner of many buildings and residents, and have access, transmit this information to all the people in this project or Housing Authority, because some of them are managed by a private company under the regulation of Housing Authority. And the private management company is putting a stop any information that is not convenient for the profit. So that's why I invite you to work with Housing Authority and transmit all this information to the people with low income. If you think that scam is just for people with money, you are wrong. It happened to me, and here just spent $11 in McDonald's. $11 you say is nothing, but for my low income, it is something that concerns me. So just these two things.
Yeah, I think the point is well taken. All of us have, in one way or the other, been the target of a thief or a scammer. A lot of times, it's not as personal as that. It's more like they get your credit card number or a Social Security number, and then all of a sudden somebody files a tax return in your name, and which happened to my husband. And the guy even got money back. He filed before we did, and then we tried to file, and they said, you didn't even make enough money, so we had to give you money back. And I said, oh, I like that. No, but you know what the real problem is about all of that? And we all fall into this trap. If your credit card number is stolen, and you get the call, the fraud alert that somebody just bought $5,000 worth of iTunes or whatever, and you get all upset, and they say, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And that happens to all of us. That's billions of dollars, and it's business as usual. So you just get a new card, and you're happy because you didn't pay the $5,000. The merchant, that's part of their deal. But why are credit card fees so high, and why are the interest so high? Because it has to cover those costs. There's no answer for that. It's just going to get worse and worse. And obviously, if you get a call from Nigeria, you're not going to send any money. But they're so devious, and as soon as law enforcement cannot keep up. And we can try to put out all this information, which we do, but people still get taken advantage of. I don't know if there's an answer. I mean, we can't shut down the internet. I mean, well, yes, ma'am.
Senator Passidomo, I want to thank you for all you do for the elders in our state and the headways you've made, so I appreciate that. I'm an elder law attorney in Orlando, and one of the things I would like to mention is, I know the budget's a hot topic, but we really need more Medicaid dollars for the community programs, and isolation of the elders is a big opening. Isolation is fruitful for the exploiters. And if we had more community Medicaid dollars to give more home care and more help to move elders who need assisted living, we would have more protections for them and prevent them from some of this. And I know that's difficult. It's federal and state dollars,
Right.
but all the money right now is only directed towards the nursing home and the waiting list. I have clients that need that care, and they've been on the waiting list for years. So
Right.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Of course, everything revolves around the budget. In fact, the legislature only has one constitutional job, and that's to pass a balanced budget. It's the hardest thing we do. I meet with so many people who come to me with their project, their initiative, their agency for great needs. We have a $90 billion budget. I'm going to give you a quick 2 seconds on budget. $90 billion budget, we have a population of about 21, 22 million people. New York State has has the same population as we have. Their budget is twice the size. Why is that? I mean, is that something we should be proud of? Yes, because we don't have an income tax. All of our funds come from sales tax, documentary stamp tax, et cetera. The only way that we could fill all the needs that come in, and they're all so, is to raise taxes. And the legislature can't do that without your permission. It's in the Constitution. And so that would be, so well, here's what we have to do. We have to look at what priorities are. 2 years ago in our budget, Senator Negron put in an additional, I think it was like $200 or $300 million for nursing homes. And because there was problems in the nursing homes with the quality standards of care, that went a long way, but it was a one-shot deal. Last year we gave them a little less. First thing they did was hire people. Well, if you hire people, you got to keep them. And so now they're asking for more money. We are now doing a whole audit review of the I budget for people with disabilities. There are 20,000 people on that waiting list. These are families with severely disabled members, and they're struggling by. It's the hardest job that any legislator has to do is budget items. And at the same time as I'm fighting for money for our older folks, and the environmentalists are saying, whoa, you can't do that. We need it. So real quick on the budget, almost half of the budget of the state of Florida goes to health care, almost half. The next, that's about 43%. The next 27% goes to education, pre-K through 12 and higher ed. That leaves the rest, you can do the math, for everything else. Public safety, the prisons, the operation of governments, infrastructure, roads, bridges, and the environment. So I would love to do everything that we have to do everything we possibly can. We just have to weigh it and ask for your help. And that's the biggest problem. Does that make sense? I know you probably don't like hearing that, but that's what it is. You can throw me out when I don't know what. Okay.
All right. To greatly increase or decrease and prevent some of these exploitation events, is there anything legislatively that can be done, enabling legislation that would greatly increase the number of persons who can serve as powers of attorney, and the accountability and the checks and balances and the training for power of attorney folk, and also representative payees? There's been a lot of discussion about guardians and inequity, but that gets very complicated, and it's hard to find guardians to get people to be guardians. So is there anything that could greatly increase the number, the competency, accountability, and checks on persons who can serve as powers of attorney and representative payees?
The power of attorney issue is one that's a thorny issue. A couple of years ago, a bill was filed by, I think it was Sun City Center people wanted to routinely take powers of attorney so that they could help out their residents. And at first I thought, boy, that's a great idea. And then I thought, whoa, there's no court oversight. If you have that's the $1 million question. You can do all the training and everything in the world possible, but there's no third-party oversight over those types of powers, unless the powers are part of the guardian system or another system, then we have no way of knowing, because there's no report filed. And you're probably be a great, you could probably do a great power of attorney program. But how many thieves are out there that aren't? Like the one on Marco Island, I mean, she had a power of attorney and she was signing things like crazy. So I am hesitant to endorse a program where it's just powers of attorney. And it comes up on its own without court oversight. That's just my personal feeling. When I'm gone, you can change it. So you're throwing me off? That's good. Well, I sincerely thank you for allowing me to speak to you. Shanna has my information. If you have ideas, thoughts, etc., give them to her, and then we can. And when the bill comes out, if you think there's things that are really bad in it, let me know. Here's the other thing. You guys, when there are bills that are floating around, they get filed and they go through committees and they change. If you see things that you don't like, or you think by being in the field that there's something wrong, don't wait till the night before we're going to vote on it on the floor, because it's not going to change. It's when it goes through the process to let people like Sharon know, who lives in my office when she's not in hers. And again, I appreciate all that you do to help our vulnerable citizens. Thank you.